Learning Japanese can seriously feel like running headfirst into a brick wall. And that wall, it's usually made of thousands of these super complex characters called kanji. But what if? What if there was a way to crack the code instead of just trying to memorize the whole thing? Well, today we're going to explore a really revolutionary method from James W. Heisig that turns this whole impossible task into a logical puzzle you can actually solve. I mean, it's a story we've all heard, right? Maybe you've even lived it. You get super excited about the culture, the language, everything's going great. And then, boom, progress just stops. You hit this wall that feels completely insurmountable. And for most people, that wall is built from one specific thing.
Yup. For so many, it's the kanji. The old school way to learn them is just brute force memorization. Thousands of characters, and each one has multiple pronunciations or readings. The sheer amount of what feels like totally random information is, well, it's less like learning and more like some impossible memory test you're doomed to fail. So, here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to talk about this great kanji wall and what makes it so tough. Then we'll bust a huge myth about the right way to learn. And after that, we'll get into the good stuff, unpacking Heisig's code cracking system and showing you a much smarter way forward. Okay, so let's start by taking a closer look at the wall itself. The biggest challenge isn't just learning what the characters mean. Nope, it's mastering how they sound. This is exactly where most learners just get completely stuck. The real problem boils down to what Heisig calls notorious inconsistencies. See, you've got thousands of characters, but a pretty limited number of sounds in the language. So what happens? You end up with a massive confusion of homonyms, tons of words that sound exactly the same but mean totally different things. For a learner, trying to connect a character to the right sound feels like a total guessing game. And that leads us right into a really common trap: trying to learn Japanese the way a Japanese child would. Heisig argues that for adult learners, this is actually a huge mistake. Think about it. As an adult, you have a powerful advantage you didn't have as a kid: years and years of analytical thinking. Heisig's whole point is that you shouldn't just repeat things over and over. Instead, you can use the skills you already have to find a much more direct, more efficient way to get where you want to go. Part of finding that right path is, avoiding the wrong tools. And Heisig has some really strong words for people who rely on romaji. That's writing Japanese words with our alphabet. He says it's not a helpful crutch at all. He calls it a self-inflicted amputation that actually stops you from learning the real writing systems and can even mess up your pronunciation. Ouch. So, if trying to memorize everything is the wrong way to go, what's the right way? This is where Heisig's breakthrough comes in. He says we should treat kanji not as a memory problem, but as a pattern recognition problem. Now this is the idea that just flips everything on its head. What if the sounds aren't random at all? What if a ton of characters have a built-in clue to their own pronunciation? A kind of phonetic code that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. Okay, so how does this code actually work? It's all built around a concept Heisig calls signal primitives. These are the actual tools you use to decipher all those phonetic patterns inside the characters. Right, so here's the key. A signal primitive is basically a little piece, a building block inside a character that consistently points to a specific Chinese-derived pronunciation, which is called the On-yomi. It's like a recurring phonetic clue. Let's actually see this in action, because this is where it gets cool. Take this primitive element here, ju. By itself, it means middle, and you read it as ju. Now look what happens when it's used as a piece in these other, more complicated characters. It consistently signals that exact same chu sound, whether the character means loyalty or offing or go-between. So just by learning this one pattern, you've unlocked the pronunciation for a whole family of characters. How cool is that? Now, this isn't just some little one-off trick that works for a few characters. Oh no, Heisig built an entire, really comprehensive system around this idea to cover all the general use kanji. A huge part of the system is this divide and conquer idea. Heisig is really big on separating the Chinese readings, the On-yomi, which are perfect for his signal primitive method, from the native Japanese readings, the Kun-yomi. If you try to learn both at the same time for the same character, it just creates a huge mess in your brain. You got to tackle them as two totally separate projects. And believe me, the system is incredibly thorough. It organizes characters into all these predictable categories. You have pure groups, where the rule always works, like the one we just saw.
But it also covers semi-peer groups, mixed groups, and even has strategies for characters that don't fit any pattern. It's designed to cover basically every possibility.
So what does this all add up to? Well, the whole philosophy is about shifting from brute force to an intelligent strategy. It's about learning smarter, not just harder. And here is the real payoff. By mastering these signal primitives, Heisig says you can learn well over 1/3 of all the Chinese readings through simple pattern recognition, not mind-numbing, painful rote memorization. That is a massive return on your study time. Now, this method isn't some magic bullet, right? It doesn't mean you don't have to put in the effort. What it does is make sure your effort actually counts. It channels your hard work into a rational system that uses your intelligence as a learner, and that ultimately saves you so much wasted time and frustration. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Heisig's approach really shows that what often seems like an impossible task of just memorizing stuff might really just be a complex system waiting for someone to come along and decode it. So what other impossible skill in your life might just be a matter of finding the right system?